So, morning everybody. Welcome to today's FDA webinar. We seem to be having them coming along like the 7 bus at the moment. They're coming along thick and fast. But delighted today to be working with Ian Ainsley from Unsworth, who are FDA members. And Ian and I were actually both at the IFE trade show in one of the export hub sessions as well. So yeah, this one should be pretty slick, I think, given Ian's expertise and knowledge. We're sharing today because I think as the FDA, we get a lot of inquiries about the practicalities of exporting into the EU. And I think the recent FDF statistics that came out, you'll see that the EU is still 57% of all our food and drink exports. So it's still a really, really important market. But I know that a number of people do struggle with some of the technicalities and looking for help to get it right. So we wanted today to offer a solution. So Ian's going to share with you a little bit of expertise on what they do, and specifically looking at a solution that revolves around French VAT and DPP, but I'll leave Ian to talk through the technicalities of that. If you've got any questions, you can pop them in the chat or wait to the end and you can pop your hand up. And then at that point, we can either give you the mic or ask the question. So hope that makes sense. For those of you that are joining who are non-members, just a very quick intro into the Food and Drink Exporters Association. We are a community of people in the food and drink sector, either as manufacturers or export service providers or in-market expert members, and very much sharing and passing on insights and knowledge is a big part of what we do. So this is a little taste of it. If you want to connect with me afterwards, very happy to talk through membership in more detail and how that might benefit you. But enough from me. You've joined to listen to Ian. So Ian, if I could, I'll pass the mic over to you and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the kind introduction there. Am I right in saying that you can see my screen? That's all showing nicely?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, and everybody can hear me, which always helps. So, yeah, brief agenda. Firstly, that's me. You can see me there. My name is Ian Ainsley. I'm an international trade specialist with Unsworth, which basically involves helping companies with innovative solutions since Brexit, which we'll get into shortly. By way of an agenda, just a brief introduction, which we've already done. Who Unsworth is, so that you know who you're talking to. The impact of Brexit. What our solution is to streamline the process and just make it a lot easier since Brexit was introduced to sell and export. The benefits and advantages of the solution that we're proposing and what the next steps would be to implement that. And then, as we mentioned at the start, there's a quick Q&A session, so please feel free to enter questions into the chat and we'll get to them at the end. So briefly, a bit about Unsworth. I mentioned that I've been working with the company since Brexit, which was a whole lot of fun when that all kick-started. But bigger picture, we've been in business for more than 50 years now, and we're one of the largest independent freight forwarders, offices throughout the UK, in China, our own office, and also in Ireland, because that's becoming more of a hotspot for exports since Brexit too. And we've got a great team of customs solution providers and freight management teams that integrate very well with a fully robust digitalized process. Bit of name dropping. These are some of the companies that we work with on a daily basis that we have introduced this particular solution to. Some household names there like Tilda, Morrison's, and some of the bigger names like Kraft Heinz and Kerry that you can see there. Very happy to count them as some of our bigger clients. So let's get into the meat of it. There's no sugarcoating it really. Brexit wasn't particularly good or hasn't been particularly good for imports and exports, particularly the food industry with the additional red tape around products of animal origin. There's been a consequent loss of business. I've spoken to a lot of companies since Brexit. They've experienced that loss and there's reasons for that, really. I've just listed a couple there. Buyers in the EU really not wanting to get involved in the customs process, what the duty rate is, what's the import VAT, who's going to handle the clearance, and engaging with the right kind of import brokers, that kind of thing. It's often a lot easier for them to just buy within the EU. If there's a comparable product, if they're based in Germany and the comparable product is in Holland, again, let's not sugarcoat it. They're likely to choose that supplier over somebody in the UK because of the additional red tape that we're now seeing. And there's increased costs as well in two ways. Firstly, as probably some of you are aware, you need to have a vet involved to get export health certs for meat and dairy products, even honey. And there's kind of hidden costs as well if you're new to exporting and you're not working with a broker and a broker partner in the EU that know what they're doing. You may have experienced the rather nasty side of things where a truck gets stuck and is just waiting and waiting for the green light from customs. So there's hidden costs there as well. But it's not all bad news. We do have a solution, as we've referred to previously. It basically will allow, we can't get rid of the red tape. The legislation is what it is. You have to jump through those hoops, but from your buyer's perspective, what we can do is remove that red tape. We can remove the perceived trade barriers, and we can remove the customs burden. And what that does, in effect, is it just makes it as easy as possible for your potential clients and clients that you've lost to just say, yes, okay, this now makes sense. Let's start doing business. And the three magic letters with this solution are DDP, which is delivered duty paid. Now, I know that at the start of Brexit, a lot of advice was given to UK exporters that they should put all the burden on the buyer, go with Ex Works, go with FCA. That's the way to do it. But that hasn't borne out very well, because buyers in the EU, like I said in the previous slide, they don't want to deal with the customs burden unless they're specifically a big company that's set up to do that. You've even got huge companies like Amazon who just want everything done DDP. It has to be DDP because they don't want that customs burden. So what DDP will allow you to do is define where the customs takes place and who you do the customs with. So you're removing that burden from your client, and they're no longer involved in that process at all. So from their perspective, it's a much easier solution, and it circumvents all of the issues that we talked about previously. Now, there are multiple benefits, logistically, financially, and from a sales perspective, and we'll get into these in depth, each of these with a dedicated slide. But what you can expect and what we've seen in implementing this with our clients is a smoother logistics and customs clearance process, particularly for goods that need inspection at the border crossing point. So chilled meat, cheese, honey, products of that nature. Financially speaking, there's potential ways of reducing your logistics spend. We'll get into them. And while we're on the subject of money, we remove the burden of paying import VAT totally. It's not a loophole. It's a completely legal way, and we'll get into that shortly. And from a sales perspective, the fact that you can go to your buyers in the EU and say, look, we'll just deliver the truck. You take care of it, offload it from the back of the truck. That's it. It's going to simplify and enhance your sales process. And we've actually seen that happen with our clients in doing that. So let's take a closer look at each of those advantages there. The smoother logistics and clearance, that comes from the fact that you get to define where the customs clearance takes place and how it takes place. We use Calais as the principal port of entry into the EU. It's not specific to Calais. You can use it through Zeebrugge, you can use it through Rotterdam, but Calais is the best served port in the EU, and we've seen that the French authorities are very willing to engage and be seen as the go-to port of entry for the EU. So yes, do your customs clearance in Calais. It's done there, and then your goods are in free circulation. Doesn't matter where your clients are, if they're in Germany, if they're in Portugal, the goods are cleared and they're in free circulation. Everything streamlines through Calais. You're stopping once and not twice. So if you're exporting chilled chicken, you will do your inspection at the CIVEP, and you'll do your customs clearance there as well, because it's actually two separate processes. But it's combined in Calais, everything taken care of by the same broker. You've got one import broker doing the clearance and the inspection. You're not dealing with multiple brokers, and you're not dealing with multiple borders. Everything just goes through the same place. And as it says there, it's a much more quick and efficient way of getting it done. And I've already covered there the free circulation. You're not dealing with multiple customs officials. So there's a couple of names that often come up. I won't name them in terms of who is worse to deal with the customs clearance, but you totally circumvent that, and you only deal with the French. I know we give the French a lot of stick a lot of the time, but in terms of getting stuff cleared, when you're working with a motivated and experienced broker, it really does just work. From a financial perspective, there's 2 or 3 reasons why DDP would make sense. Firstly, there is no T1 involved. I know that if you are using a T1, that can cost anything up to €100 per shipment. Do the clearance in Calais, then you don't need a T1 to move to, let's say, the Dutch border or the Italian border. You're already cleared. You don't need a T1. Also removes the risk of the T1 not being closed out properly, which, that can get quite ugly sometimes in terms of who needs to close it out. If it's not closed out, all the fines totally removes that complexity and the cost. Reduced risk of demurrage. I mentioned earlier, if you've got a truck that has arrived, unfortunately, we saw this a lot at the start of Brexit. It's arrived, the export health cert isn't completed properly, or there is no export health cert, or you didn't know that honey is classified as a product of animal origin, or there's no private attestation. There's all kinds of reasons why the truck might get stopped at the border crossing point in Calais or wherever it is. If you're doing DDP, you'd be working with somebody like Unsworth. We do this on a daily basis. There's not much that we haven't seen happen in Calais, but if something does happen that we haven't seen before, we've got the presence there in Calais to, get your shipment moved. We're incentivized to do that, because if we're keeping your goods flowing, you want to keep working with us. So it's, a kind of you scratch my back, I scratch yours relationship. We just keep your stuff moving, and we got the experience to do that. And finally, with the T1, if you've got a full truckload and you cross the channel, you arrive at Calais, you do your inspection there, and then you've got to move to the German border and then travel down to Munich. You'll be moving from Calais down to the German border and then to Munich. If you don't have a T1 and you're moving direct through to Munich, you are removing that need to divert and stop. So firstly, it's quicker. And secondly, it's going to be cheaper because you're moving directly to that destination. From a sales perspective, I covered it briefly a bit earlier, but it offers your clients the best buying perspective. I have said it a couple of times. We've seen this happen with clients that were struggling and lost business. They're now rebuilding their business because DDP has allowed them to go to clients that they lost, because those clients weren't willing to deal with customs or weren't set up to deal with customs, or just, they found, unfortunately, simpler solutions within the EU. You're now able to go to them and say, look, this is as simple as it gets now. You can buy from us in the same way that you buy from Carl Schmidt in Germany. We just deliver, you take it off the back of the truck, and that's it. We'll take care of the VAT, the duty, and the clearance. And what that will allow you to do is compete on equal terms with your competition in the EU. There is, from your buyer's perspective, it's a bit of a no-brainer now. Again, that analogy of the truck just turning up, from their perspective, that's what it's going to be, buying from Carl Schmidt in Germany or buying from ABC in the UK. And yeah, I've seen it happen firsthand with clients, in particular, a brief case study, a company called Pecan Deluxe. They make inclusions for ice cream. They were struggling with the EU. We put the DDP in place for them. It streamlined everything, and it's allowed them to approach previous clients that they'd lost and just rebuild that relationship and start selling to them on a DDP basis. The import VAT, this is kind of key and more specific to the French and Calais, which is another reason why we like Calais. Just thinking of the easiest way to phrase this, really, when you go through Calais, what happens is that the import VAT is calculated, but it is then auto-liquidated, which means it's taken into account, it's put on the import declaration, and then it's written off. And this happens because with DDP, you will have a French VAT number. So from a VAT perspective, it's a French VAT sale to your client's EU VAT. So it's an intra-EU supply, so no import VAT is payable. So that's how it works. And it just makes things much simpler for your buyer. I know that if you're selling to Germany, for example, the buyer has to pay the import VAT and then has to claim it back, and that process can take months. And while that money's tied up, you've got a negative cash flow impact. So this is another string to your bow in selling to the EU. We can totally remove the import VAT burden and just make it much simpler for you. So lots of benefits there for you. Hopefully I've given a good demonstration of that and why DDP is a solution that works and how you can benefit from it. In terms of next steps in implementing it, you would simply need to get a French VAT number to go through France. If you want to go through Rotterdam, it would be a Dutch VAT number. And you need an EU EORI. The EU EORI can be from any state. It doesn't have to be the state where you want to do the clearance. So you can have a Portuguese EU number, but you can still do the clearance with a French VAT number. There's two ways of doing it. You can rent an existing French VAT number, or you can acquire your own French VAT number. There's pros and cons around each of those. I think won't go too much in depth about the pros and cons now, but reach out to me for a subsequent phone call, deeper conversation. I can certainly cover why you might want to rent a number or why you might want to acquire one. And a lot of my clients are still quite surprised, pleasantly so, that there's no need for an entity in the EU. You can do this entirely virtually. You will acquire the VAT number against your UK entity, and you'll be able to do it that way. So you don't have any physical entity or payroll or anything or obligation with staff in the EU. So that's what the next steps would be. Engage with somebody like ourselves. We can sort that out for you, and we can work with our partners in France so that you have a team that knows exactly what they're doing in terms of the setting you up, and then more importantly, the actual running of the process to make sure that everything is going smoothly. And that brings me to the end. Hopefully I've given some good insight there as to why DDP is a good idea, why it works, and where the benefits are for you in implementing it. So yeah, that's me done.
Great, thanks, Ian. No, really, really precise and clear. I think that was very, very good. And we will let you have these slides afterwards if you want to go back and just sort of check the process. So I think, yeah, thank you very much for pulling that together in what is a very complex subject and making it easy to follow. If you have got a question, as I say, either pop something in the chat or put your hand up. I think perhaps if we sort of kick things off a little bit, just to define a little bit of the terminology you used, Ian, just so people are clear. You talked about the import broker quite a bit. You just define who that is in the chain. Is that you, or is that a third party?
Yep, good question. So, sorry, there's a distracting noise outside in the form of my cat. Just wait for her to shut up, and then I can hear myself think. Yes, so if you're new to this, or even if you're reasonably experienced, I'll just run through who does what. You will need an export broker, and that in that chain, hopefully that would be somebody like Unsworth, and you would need an import broker, because with DDP, you take care of the import clearance, and you would need an import broker in the country of clearance and inspection. So with the examples that we've given, that would be Calais. The import broker would serve two purposes. They would make sure that the customs clearance is taken care of smoothly and efficiently. They would write off the import VAT so that that's not payable. They would take into account any VAT taxes that need paying, and they would sort out the any duties that are payable. As you may be aware, if your goods are of GB origin, there would be no import duty to pay. But if you are importing goods from outside of the UK and then exporting to the UK, duty would be payable. They would calculate what's payable and take care of that. So you've got the export, that would be Unsworth doing that. And the import would be the broker partner in Calais, taking care of the clearance and the inspection and just taking care of all of the financial aspects of the clearance and the inspection with CIVEP. And key here is working with partners that know what they're doing and have been doing it, have been through the wars that were the start of Brexit and have got a well-oiled machine so that they know exactly what they're doing, and they've got that relationship with the authorities at the border crossing point.
Great, that's good. That explains that. Thank you very much. Can't see any questions. I think you've explained it so well. Everyone's taken notes and taken it all on board. If anyone would like to share their experience or share anything they've been doing that's different, or if anyone's got any kickback on what Ian said, in the theory versus the reality of doing it, very happy to hear from you as well. I think interestingly what you're saying about Calais, I know when we had a workshop recently with one of the Spanish importers, they were telling us that they clear through Calais now as well, rather than going through Spain, just because it is so much easier for them. So I think it sort of backs up, I think, what you're saying there.
Yeah, there's some. I'll be careful how I phrase this. You would think, looking from the outside, that the fact that it's the EU and the key word there is union, that everything is the same everywhere. So yes, the legislation is the same everywhere, but what you find is the interpretation of that legislation will be different in each state. So, the clearance in Italy, the way the Italian customs work will be different to the way that the Germans work, and likewise the way the Portuguese work. And again, not wishing to, flog a dead horse, but if you clear at a single customs point and work with a single customs entity, you know exactly what they're looking for every time you do your clearance. So you're not thinking, okay, have we got the right color ink for the Italian customs? And yes, I have had kickback from Italian customs that the export health cert was blue ink and not black ink. It goes to that depth of ridiculousness sometimes, but yeah, just working with the same people day in, day out just makes it a lot easier, and you know what to expect. So yeah.
Right. Good.
And what I would say, if it's okay, I have mentioned Calais quite a few times. We are working on doing a tour of the Calais facility. We've done this a couple of times already with food exporters. Take you out there, show you firsthand what happens when the truck hits Calais, how it goes through the inspection process and the clearance process, so that you can see from the ground level exactly what goes on. So that's something that we're working to do. And if that's potentially of interest to you, just reach out to me on the contact details below. And if and when that becomes a reality later this year, then I can certainly reach out and just let you know that that's going to be happening.
Good. And appreciate you said you'd follow up on the VAT side of things. Just from your experience, how easy is it for a company to set that up themselves? Have you got any sort of insights on the timeline that takes, or is it just simply a online form and you're done?
Yeah. So I mentioned there's two options. The rental option, that would get you set up to do the DDP within a matter of days. And that would simply be a matter of working with our broker partners in France to fill out a form. They will get you set up and off you go. The other option of getting an actual French VAT number, again, you'd work with our partners in France. That would take about 6 weeks. There's pros and cons in terms of cost and what you can and can't do with the exports. Again, like I said, reach out and I'll have a deeper conversation with you on where the pros and cons are for that. But essentially, once you're up and running and you've got either a French VAT number or a rented French VAT number, that the process takes care of itself. All you need to do is just send us the pertinent paper per shipment, and we just get on with that. And the VAT is taken care of by the partner in France. It's a very hands-off process, very streamlined process, and that's part of the joy of it. Is you're taking the burden off your client, but it's also not an onerous task for you to manage as well, because it's taken care of by specialists to make it as easy as possible.
Good, that's reassuring. Yeah, thank you. I think, Stephen, did you put your hand up and then it disappeared again? I don't know if you perhaps answered the question you're going to ask, but do feel free to ask it now.
Thank you. No, it was your comment earlier about the different interpretation of the legislation stroke rules by each individual country. My question was, is there a move by the central body, whoever that might be, to standardize that? Because we've seen it with, say, technical regulations, for example, where one importer or one customer is viewing that a certain set of goods are exempt from this particular one, and then all of a sudden it's being stopped at customs in another country because they all of a sudden have decided to pay attention to it. Is there a move to standardize this? Or do you think it always will be this kind of individual approach by market that you have to adopt?
Good question. From my experience, I haven't seen any kind of organized move to say, look, we've got the rule book, we all need to interpret it this way. And this is just my opinion on this. I think it will continue to be as it is. The Italians like to do it their way. The French like to do it their way. That's just the nature of, people and nations. And you'll find even within, excuse me, you'll find even within customs officialdoms themselves that there's different interpretations. So we've had experiences in the past where we'd be exporting something like gelatine on a regular basis through Calais and it was going smoothly. The particular official left for whatever reason and his replacement came in and was questioning things differently. And the way that we've overcome that particular problem is, we get it in writing from the offset, from the officialdom. Okay, this is it, ABC, that's how it's going to be done. And then we got it in writing. And if somebody new comes along and says, oh, but it should be done like this, then we can show them the correspondence that says, no, this is the official guidance we've got. This is how we've been doing it. So, sorry, you're wrong. Let's carry on doing it the way it was done. And, they'll often see sense because, there's no point in arguing against something just for the sake of it if it's worked previously the way it was done before. So, yeah, the short answer is no, I've not seen anything. But, the solution we've got is just work with one party rather than multiple.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And likewise, yeah, we haven't heard of anything either. We do feed in member issues into both the Department of Business and Trade and DEFRA to keep their teams up to date. And I know at the moment they're looking at the whole samples issue, which we're pushing as something that needs to be renegotiated. The complexities of getting a sample into Europe are kind of crazy. I think EasyJet hand luggage is most people's recommendations because it's just so difficult. So yeah, anything that you come across as a barrier or something that has come up that's different, do let us know because we can feed that into the DBT have got DEFRA have got 2 agricultural attaches based in the EU now, one for the north of Europe, one for the south. And their job is to represent those issues and try and get any barriers taken down. Now, they're not going to renegotiate the whole agreement, but when they come across these nuances that just seem slightly crazy, hopefully a little bit of pressure one day might fall on the right ears. So yeah, do keep feeding those through to us. William.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm interested that you say that sort of the Calais BCP is kind of the best option, actually, because I guess in my previous life, I've worked with the Calais BCP for quite a number of years, actually, and come across quite a few of those problems that you mentioned, including the one about ink, for example. Feels ridiculous in sort of 2025, we're talking about sort of smudging an ink document to make sure it's the right color, sort of thing. Do you feel sort of that the Calais CivEP is kind of working hard to sort of streamline that and make it easier for EU imports into Europe?
Yeah, good question. Yes, I would say. I know that a lot of money was spent upgrading Calais port. It was very pleasing to go out there and see how good it looks and how slick it runs. You know, a lot of investment there to make it the go-to port. And I think that if there were a disconnect between, you know, the fact that the government have invested all this money in the facility and in the infrastructure, and then the CivEP were just acting like, you know, totally out of sync with that and just being difficult, there wouldn't be an incentive for people to go through Calais. There wouldn't be an incentive for people to choose that as the port of entry, and they would defer to somewhere else, potentially even, you know, Dunkirk or Saint-Malo or somewhere like that. So from my experience, I know that where we do have difficulties and we've engaged the CivEP directly, as we're doing, to arrange this trip through Calais, they're always very receptive. It's not a case of, it's not been a case of, you know, them being dictatorial. If the rule is black and white and it says, okay, tea from China needs this certificate and you don't have this certificate, that's, you know, that's self-explanatory. You should have that certificate. But if, you know, if there's, it's just a point of interpretation, and there's a way of negotiating it to bring them around to our point of view, then they're open to that, and we do that. So it's good to have that ace up your sleeve, knowing that they are open to that kind of conversation, and it's not just going to be a closed door. That, you know, we can go in there and ask those questions to, excuse me, to resolve those issues.
That's interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think obviously it is the busiest by quite some margin of all of the entries as well, and sometimes maybe that's what slows it down, I suppose. But yeah, I guess sometimes these things also can be politicized as well. Don't want to get into that, but yeah, I think probably just off my own experiences, sort of seen a few different problems that sort of come about there. So yeah, I guess if it's something they're sort of keen to work towards, that's a good progression for the future, I suppose.
Are you shipping through another port, William? Are you going through somewhere other than Calais?
Well, I'm in a different life now, actually. So yeah, different business. So might not have that problem as directly, but there were talks to sort of use kind of in Belgium, for example, Zeebrugge has a smart port, so smart customs clearance, for example. So that was an option that was aired at times. Equally speaking, kind of the crossings aren't as frequent there. So I think ultimately the decision was taken to sort of persevere with Calais and work hard with the brokering team to improve that situation. But yeah, I mean, I think I've had things in the past. For example, I mean, my past experience was cheese, so products of animal origin, and I think had situations like probes being put in and saying actually you're half a degree more than what you say on the box, because obviously if you open the doors, then temperature is going to rise by a little bit, sort of thing. So niggly things like that obviously cost time and money to to the freighting of getting it into the EU. So yeah, I guess it's just about that appreciation at the border control point that goods must ultimately, where they're compliant, get through.
What come across that one where they're probing and saying it's half a degree off? When was that? Was that towards the start of Brexit or more recently?
It was last summer.
Okay, and that was through Calais.
Yeah.
And was that a first-time importer or somebody that had been importing for a while?
No, I've been doing it for about 3 or 4 years.
And suddenly they've done that.
Yeah.
And how was it resolved, just out of interest?
The goods were rejected, had to be taken back to the port of site to be re-vetted, get a new health cert, and then crossed with a new application, essentially. So at that point, the goods had very little life left to achieve MLOR. I think just about managed to sail it before derogation requirement, but yeah, had a big impact on the good saleability. So yeah, these things hurt.
Absolutely, and that's what I was talking about earlier with the demurrage and the return costs and such like. I've not come across that one, but again, as you probably experienced at the time, the key there is having the right people talking to the right people to make sure that where you can avoid return, doing whatever you can to make that happen, whether it's sending out a brand new export health cert by courier or something like that. Yeah, but that's a new one on me. So
Yeah.
still learning, and every time you come across this, it's more experience that you can use for something difficult that comes up the next time.
Of course.
Yeah, it probably does highlight what you were saying, Ian, about it sometimes being down to the individual who's conducting the work on that particular day. So yeah, good. No, thanks for that, William. That's really insightful. Good. Well, I think I can't see any other hands up. Shout now if I can't see you on the screen. There's quite a lot of you on today. But if not, a big thank you to Ian. I think that was really, really helpful. Your contact details are still visible on the screen. I think just watch Ian's is IAI. I did IAN the first time I sent it, and that's not what it is. So if anyone is emailing, put IAI at unsworth.uk.
And also there's no co there, if you notice. It's usually .co.uk, but we like
You're
to be
challenging us all, Ian, with a complicated email.
Well, we like to streamline it. You see, we remove
attention
those.
to detail. You see, you'll
Yeah.
see who's doing it properly.
Yeah, so it's
but no, that's
.uk.
good. And John, just seeing your note. Yeah, I'll follow up with you on membership. That's great. A couple of things that are relevant to this conversation that are coming up. Hopefully you've seen on the FDA portal that next week, on the 1st of April, Sutralis, who are the in-market member for France, are running a workshop on the French market. So given we focus so much on Calais today, I think that seems a good segue into that one. And on the 3rd of April, we have another one of our logistics members, WTA, talking in detail about Incoterms more broadly. Obviously, we focus very much on DPP today, but if you or any of your members of staff would value that, that one's going to be on the 3rd of April. So it could be good for those involved in all the logistics side of what you're doing. And then just a plug for our next in-person event, which is the 4th of June, which is our Summer Network Forum, which is a really strong day of case studies and sharing and peer-to-peer connections. Normally about 120 odd people are coming along to that. So if you haven't booked up, that's live now on the portal as well. And it'd be good to see all of you in person if we can. I'm sure you'd value the day. So I think that's it. Thank you very much again to Ian. Thank you to all of you for joining. We will send around the recording and if Ian's agreeable, the copy of the slides, and do reach out to Ian. I think as he's demonstrated today, the importance of having good partners to get things working smoothly is absolutely vital. And hopefully some of you will go away and review what you're doing and connect with Ian if he's offering a good solution. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy the weekend. And yeah, thank you very much. We'll speak again soon. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.